report in Iran. Not sure if you saw the report, just came out now. No reports of an explosion or anything like that. Maybe sabotage, maybe accident, because everyone's very sensitive. But we haven't spoken in a while. It's been a couple of weeks. Since we spoke, there's been the attacks that happened a couple of days ago. But more importantly, we seem to be getting closer and closer to peace. The sticking points are the unfreezing of assets, but also the control of the Strait of Hormuz, charging a fee. That seems to be resolved. They're gonna call it something else, like a maritime fee or an environmental fee, something like that, to replicate the strategy in the Danish Straits or the Turkish Straits, the two straits there. Unfreezing of assets seems to still be a sticking point, and a lot of people are saying that we've been here before, and this doesn't mean anything. And Israel continues to escalate in Lebanon today. Lebanon's getting pummeled. What do you make of these developments? Are you optimistic, or same as last time we spoke?
I think that what's fascinating about the way things are playing is that Trump enters a meeting with all of the major leaders, almost all of the major leaders of the region, on a Zoom call or an online call. In it is Pakistan, in it is Erdogan of Turkey, in it is Mohammed bin Salman of Saudi Arabia, bin Zayed of UAE, the Qataris are involved. He has them all in one place, and they're talking to Donald Trump directly. And all of them are saying to Donald Trump, Mr. President, please just agree to a peace with the Iranians. And Asim Munir, the chief of staff of the Pakistani army, flies to Tehran with a suggestion that there's something definitely in the works. Come on, Iran, like we're about to get Trump to agree. And the Iranians give him this unofficial memorandum of understanding. The Qataris, they start mobilizing to mediate with the Iranians as well. And now they've all gathered to tell Donald Trump, Mr. President, please make peace. And Donald Trump, hearing this unanimous call coming from the region, turns around and says, I'll do the deal if you all agree to normalize ties with the Israelis, which tells you exactly the sticking point in this entire deal. How does Trump get the Israelis to accept the deal? The biggest concern that the regional powers have is that if Trump can't rein in the Israelis in Lebanon after promising a ceasefire, if he can't rein them in Gaza, then what's the guarantee for the Iranians by which they make a deal with Trump? Trump says, okay, we've agreed on these details. And then tomorrow you have the Israelis suddenly going to break in the deal. And Trump gives no guarantee that he can keep the deal in check. And that's what has stunned the region. That's why the Saudis are coming out and saying, no, we will not normalize ties with the Israelis. It's why Pakistani diplomats are coming out and saying, what kind of ridiculous request is this, that we negotiate a deal, we make a deal, and now we're being asked to normalize ties with the Israelis, which Pakistan won't do. Not only that, Mario, if you look at the reaction of those who are associated with being friends of Israel, Lindsey Graham, Ted Cruz, Mark Levine, and these others, the tweets that are coming out are saying to Donald Trump pretty explicitly, telling him, Mr. President, this deal is not good for Israel. They're not arguing American interests. They're not arguing that it's good for America. The region believes this is good for the US and it's good for the Iranians. Iran believes that it's decent for the US and decent for the Iranians. But the argument that is being presented is Lindsey Graham is tweeting and saying, Pakistan can't be trusted because they won't normalize with the Israelis. That we can't trust whether this deal will take place because the Israelis won't like this particular deal. And this is why, Mario, if you think about it, Iran is saying this environmental fee. Americans don't seem to have a problem with it. The idea of unfreezing the assets, all of the leaked reports indicate that Trump won't lift sanctions, but he might unfreeze billions of dollars for the Iranians to say, I'm not going to give you the headline, I'm lifting sanctions, but I'll give you some money to allow you guys to rebuild if it keeps that peace in check. And I think that's what's me in the analyst world, at least amongst those who are in the think tankers, what is shocking for many of these analysts is even at a time when Trump needs the ceasefire, it seems like it is, in the words of Ben Gvir of Israel, who comes out and says, we won't let Trump sign this agreement because we don't think it's in our interest. And that's the shocking thing, in that, Mario, you're here describing the logic of the negotiations taking place, which I have to say you do quite well. Logically, it makes sense. This is why everybody is stunned by the illogical process by which Donald Trump seems to be foregoing the American interest for a ceasefire because the Israelis don't seem to be happy. And I think that's the concern, in that now Donald Trump is bombing the southern part of Iran to say to him, I want more concessions, not because Trump asked for it. Trump is ready to agree to the deal, but because Trump is concerned that the Israelis are not happy with it, and he's trying to find a way to make an impossible balance, because the Israelis are not opposed to the terms of the deal. They're opposed to the deal. They're not opposed to specific issues with regard. They're opposed to a peace with the Iranians that prevents them from attacking what Israelis believe to be an existential threat to Israel by virtue of the fact that Iran keeps firing missiles at them. And I think that, to finish on this particular point, I think the most frustrating thing is for the region is that no one believes that the war is a good idea, including the Americans. No one believes that war is a good idea. Everyone has ceded that there needs to be a peace. But the region is frustrated that when all of them get together with Donald Trump, think about it, when all of these American allies sit with Donald Trump, he effectively dismissed them like this and told them, but Israel wants that. And that's why the Saudis, for the Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, if he entertained the prospect of normalization with Israel, now he will not entertain it for sure, because he's demonstrated that even the UAE, which normalized, if Trump can very easily dismiss the UAE's request for some sort of peace and ceasefire in the region for participants, then what's the point in normalizing ties with the Israelis when all of American allies put together are not worth the value that Israel is to DC or to Washington or to the Americans itself? And the irony of it all, I know I said I finished on this point, but I'll finish on this point. The irony of it all is the Israelis are pushing for normalization without offering anything to the Saudis either. They're not saying to the Saudis, normalize with us and we'll give you this, or they're saying normalize with us if you want to find some sort of peace in the region with the Iranians themselves. With the UAE, at least, it was about access to Washington. It was about access to technology. It was about access to new economies. It was about preferential treatment and the like. They're not even offering the Saudis that. They're telling them, Trump told them, if you want peace, if you don't want Iranian missiles hitting you, if you don't want instability in the region from the Iranians, I want you to normalize with the Israelis, without realizing that brings its own instability to the region. As the Saudi Crown Prince has constantly told the Americans, you guys don't understand. If I normalize with the Israelis, I get assassinated. If I normalize with the Israelis, I get destroyed. And the Israelis are saying, well, the UAE did it. You have to normalize, otherwise there won't be a peace with the Iranians. If you're an Arab diplomat or a Turkish diplomat or a Pakistani diplomat, there's no way to describe it aside from being illogical and, quite frankly, absolutely disgraceful when you consider yourself a key US ally. Mario, think about it. The Americans lean on Pakistan for policy related to Afghanistan. The Americans have been getting closer to the Pakistanis in order to push back against the China bloc. For the sake of Israel, America compromises the front against China. America compromises the unity of the region of US allies and the future of allowing US to operate in a region free from Chinese influence or the like. The US compromises its ties with countries that have poured billions into the US economy for the sake of the Israelis. And what these allies are asking for, they're not asking for the destruction of the Israelis. They're actually saying, we want a peace deal. We want to have some sort of, without missiles firing over our heads. And even that, Trump and the Israelis refuse to offer it. And that's the scary part, Mario, in that it seems as if the Israelis are set on war. And Donald Trump has yet to demonstrate that he can rein in the Israelis, even in matters of diplomacy.
But hasn't he just reined them in now? We see Israel wanting to strike Beirut, but we're getting reports, including today, that Trump and Netanyahu had a call yesterday. Israel has escalated the war in Lebanon. They do this before a ceasefire, but they are not striking Beirut, even though they would love to do that. There's conversations right now of a debate between Netanyahu, Ben Gvir, Katz, where essentially there is no choice. Katz said it himself. They are preventing it in terms of the US vetoing strikes in Beirut. And we haven't seen strikes in Beirut. So what happens on the ground really dictates on who has more influence. And the negotiations, I'm sure Israel doesn't want.
But here you're shifting the goalpost. So let's suppose that I am an Israeli. Let's suppose I'm bombing Lebanon and I'm bombing Gaza, but I'm threatening I could bomb Beirut as well. So now they're saying Trump won't let me bomb Beirut, so I settle for South Lebanon, South Gaza. Logically, it sounds extraordinary in that.
But we've moved down. We've moved down from a Iran war because Israel wanted the ballistic missile gone, the proxy network gone, the regime change. They wanted all these things, and now we're settling for pretty much none of it. All we're settling for is maybe later we sort out the enriched uranium, and yet Iran has controlled the Strait of Hormuz. So we're kind of gone significantly down. I remember I got two quotes from Netanyahu. One of them in April, I think it was, of him saying, Iran with a ballistic missile program, a proxy network, and that regime, that will never be the same again. Something along those lines. And then I compared it to a quote from a couple of days ago saying Iran can never have a nuclear weapon. So the goalpost has shifted in the other direction.
I think that that is based on what you think the Israelis want to achieve. I think that the Israelis, their war with the Iranians is only one of the aims that they tried to pull the Americans into. But when you look at what's happening in southern Lebanon, the way they dismissed Trump's ceasefire and continue to bomb, even today, bombing water reservoirs and the like, I think the Israelis' primary aim, of which Iran is a subsidiary aim, the primary aim is expansion. It's the pushing of the borders beyond, into Gaza, further into the West Bank, and into that southern Lebanon territory, and potentially even into southern Syria, which is why they're so upset with Erdogan, because they keep telling Trump, okay, Trump, I want to bomb southern Syria. But whereas Trump doesn't put his foot down on Lebanon, he's putting his foot down on Syria because, in his words, I like Erdogan. I like the Turkish president. He's a good friend of mine. He stood with me after the rigged elections. You know, I like a strong man. And that's why he puts his foot down on Syria. For the Israelis, it's about which side can we keep pushing on that particular border. Now, a war with Iran, the purpose of it is not just regime change in and of itself, but rather the umbrella of war allows an excuse for that expansion. Consider if there is peace with the Iranians tomorrow. What excuse do you have to go and bomb an Iranian proxy in Lebanon, Hezbollah, if you have a ceasefire deal that is dependent upon peace in Lebanon? Right now, you can't go and attack Syria because Trump doesn't allow you, because he has a deal with Ahmad al-Shara in Damascus. In Gaza, let's say Trump ends the war with the Iranians. He can't argue that there are Iranian proxies in Gaza, and it may well be that becomes the main issue. And Donald Trump might say, I also don't want you to attack Gaza as well. Iran is the umbrella. It's not the target. Iran is the excuse that is required by the Israelis in order to justify that expansion going forward. And that's why that debate between Mearsheimer and Pompeo at Harvard University, when Pompeo was emphasizing that Iran needs to have its ballistic missiles removed, Mearsheimer correctly points out that there were no missiles heading towards Israel before they ended up going into Gaza. There were no missiles being attacked towards Israelis before the Israelis started their escalation themselves. Mearsheimer is the one pointing out to Pompeo. And that's what I mean by moving the goalposts in terms of the retelling of the story. No, I'm not saying that's what you did, but I'm saying in terms of that retelling of the story, what is the purpose of the war with the Iranians? I don't think that the Israelis thought that the regime could genuinely be toppled. I cannot believe for a second that the Israelis are that stupid or ignorant in the sense that they believe that the regime in Iran could fall, given that when they've tried regime change in the past, it hasn't happened before. I think, as we're seeing in the way that on the eve, you saw it on Twitter as well, Mario, when all of those tweets started coming out saying we're on the verge of a deal, and Trump posted and said, you know what, I've seen the deal, we might be getting towards a deal. Suddenly, Israel bombed Gaza again in a way reminiscent of that between 2023 and 2024. Basically, essentially lashing out, saying, no, I don't want it. It's like a baby throwing the toys out of the pram. And that's why I argue that, okay, the reality is that, as you said, Israel's aims, Israel hasn't been able to achieve its aims, yes, but the overarching umbrella still remains there. And I think that the Gulf states now are in a debate between themselves. How far will Israel go? Because Saudis are not blind to that map that Israeli soldiers have of Greater Israel. They're not blind to it at all. They know it contains part of Saudi Arabia. They know that reports now that the Americans and the Israelis want to remove the Jordanian custodianship of the Al-Aqsa mosque and turn it into a multi-faith center. They know that the Israelis, the way that they've put that map, they know that the Israelis' ultimate aim is, how can I find an excuse to take back the land that God promised me? They're aware this is Ben Gvir's aim. They're aware it's Smotrich's aim. They're aware it's what Netanyahu's aim is. The Saudis are now concerned that if we can't even get the Americans through our lobby to get Israel to sign a peace deal with the Iranians after we got hit. And bear in mind, Mario, this is the first Saudi crown prince to ever entertain the prospect of normalization with the Israelis. This is the first crown prince of Saudi Arabia to ever tell Fox News we're getting closer to normalization every single day. This is the first Saudi ruler to ever open the airspace to Israeli commercial jets and commercial planes. This is the first Saudi leader to ever allow Israeli teams to participate in tournaments on Saudi soil. This is the first Saudi leader to ever allow Israelis to go to Medina and to go and record videos there and to go and visit it when previously it was banned before. Bin Salman has offered all of that, and Israel couldn't even give him a ceasefire deal with the Iranians that he badly wants because it's not the correct time, given that he wants to improve his economy. Bin Salman is saying, what power do I even have now in order to push back against Israel if it decides that it wants to attack, quote unquote, terrorist units in the southern part of Iraq? Picture this scenario, Mario. Let's suppose the war continues and the Iranians start lashing out via the proxies in southern Iraq right now, Hadi al-Amiri, Hashd al-Sha'bi, and all of these other different units that Obama allowed to be incorporated in the Iraqi army when he wanted to appease the Iranians to secure the JCPOA deal. Let's suppose that Iran, in terms of lashing out, decides to fire missiles from that southern border. It is not far-fetched that the Israelis use this as an excuse to set up in northern Saudi Arabia in order to push back against those particular proxies and establish a permanent presence there on the border with what they deem to be Greater Israel. The Saudi Crown Prince is turning around to other Gulf allies and saying, guys, have we really lost all influence over the US, over Donald Trump, whereby now he wants us to do what is absolutely impossible? The Israelis are overreaching. The Israelis could have said, and I'm not a guy who likes to advise the Israelis could have said, let's do this ceasefire as a gesture to the Saudis. Like, you know, the Egyptians, they say, kalam bla flus. It's words that cost nothing. Let's do a ceasefire with the Iranians for now, so we can keep bin Salman holding onto the rope of potential normalization of ties. When he sees how UAE is getting Iron Dome, when he sees how UAE is getting access to technology, when he sees that we're reasonable about his interest, maybe Saudi will pursue ties. Israelis are not even allowing that. And I think that is the danger now, in that the US, in going along with the Israelis, before, and I've said on your platform before, I used to say that the Gulf used to pay lip service to China. I don't really want to shift towards China. I want to stay with the US. But if you put these states in an existential crisis because you don't even want to give them breadcrumbs of a ceasefire, they will go towards China. They will pursue autonomy. They will find it. Why? Because for them, it no longer becomes a choice. It becomes existential. Israel no longer becomes a threat which is far away. Right now, Iran is the immediate threat. But now Israel is breathing down your neck. Israel is starting to squeeze you completely, and you need a power to push back. You look at Iran and you say, wait a minute, Iran managed to resist the Israelis, and it managed to survive a US onslaught. It did it with support from the Chinese and from the Russians. What kind of technology did they have? Wallahi, you know what? Actually, I'm going to go to Beijing. I'm going to tell Xi Jinping, I'm very sorry for how I treated you before. I'm very sorry that I looked down on you. I'm very sorry that I used and abused you in my relations with the US. I genuinely now want to push back against the Israelis that are moving forward. And if AIPAC has its way, like it did with Thomas Massie and like it did elsewhere, it may well be the next administration also goes along with the Israelis. I don't think Trump realizes just how serious the threat is now to US influence and power in the Middle East. Not that I would be sad to see it go, but the point is, I don't think he realizes that in making the demand that he thinks is reasonable for the Gulf states, that unreasonable demand may well cause an irreversible shift. Because when the Saudi Crown Prince, and I said it many times, but this is where I finish.
No, continue.
When the Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman appears on TV with his eyes like this in what appears to be a bunker during the war, when he hosts his prime ministerial meeting in a room different from where he usually hosts it, leading to rumors and suggestions that he wasn't up over ground, he was underground with missiles coming towards Riyadh. When people see those images, the Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman will not give his life for Israel, will not give his life for the Americans, and probably won't give his life for anything. The Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman will look towards his survival. And the UAE, when Netanyahu cannot even give bin Zayed the respect of acknowledging that there are sensitive issues to navigate in normalization with Israel. You don't tell people you went to Abu Dhabi. You don't tell people that the Mossad chief came with you. You don't tell people that Shin Bet came with you. You don't do it because it's sensitive. Bin Zayed tells Netanyahu, I'm your friend. I've done what no one's done before. Bin Zayed tells Netanyahu, I've invested in your economy. I have incurred the wrath and anger of the entire Muslim world because I'm gambling on this friendship as we move forward. But Netanyahu, as I give, you give me too. Treat me as an equal partner. And Netanyahu says to him in the Arabic version, Toz, I don't give a damn about your sensitivities. I don't care if you want to keep this relationship in some limits. If you're having an affair with me, I'm going to announce it to the world. Everyone needs to know that we are together. Everybody needs to know that we are the same. And the Mohammed bin Zayed is in such an awkward position whereby now he has to look at the region. Not only does he have to deny that Netanyahu visited, but now he has to take a firmer stance against Netanyahu by sending his commentators to come out and say, no, we want peace. We don't want to join the Israelis in this. Netanyahu is a problem. UAE, when bin Salman is looking at bin Zayed, he's thinking, okay, Netanyahu is violating bin Zayed, like violating him. Shows no respect and no regard. Trump ignores all of us. What is the use of normalization with the Israelis? What am I going to get out of it? Not only that, Israel before has tried to veto F-35s going to the UAE because it wants military superiority. So I'm not going to get the technology either from the weapons, nor am I going to get investments. Everybody keeps saying Vision 2030 is failing. Mario, if you're a Saudi advisor sitting with the Saudi Crown Prince, Mohammed bin Salman, and you can't even get a ceasefire, who in the room is telling bin Salman that normalization is a good idea? And that's why the Israelis, in my opinion, and while I'm happy to say this, the Israelis have ruined the golden opportunity that they had for potential normalization of ties with the Saudis. And I think that that will be irrecoverable and irreversible, not because of the Israelis, but because the Americans have demonstrated they are not willing to rein in the Israelis. If the Israelis overreach and the Americans rein in, the Saudis could have said that we might normalize it to some extent because we know the Americans will stop the Israelis from going overboard. America's not even doing that. And that's the confusion that leads me to conclude. Trump has no idea what he's doing. Trump has no idea what he wants. Trump has no idea where to go. And the reason he proposed normalization, in my opinion, is Trump is so desperate for some victory. He's so desperate for the world to say he won. He wants to say that, guys, I know we didn't topple the Iranian regime, but because I went to war, everybody normalized with the Israelis. My war brought a historic peace. It's such a selfish request to make in order to secure that headline that he's ready to burn American interest in order to secure that. And I think that Trump, whatever the influence Israel seems to have on American politics in and of itself, I think Trump now is in a deep conundrum. If Trump makes a deal, then the Israeli lobby will lambast him. Mark Levine, Laura Loomer, Ted Cruz, they will lambast him. He will go from being a hero to a villain. Tucker Carlson has something interesting he said on his podcast. He said when he went to see Trump, he said to Trump, you know, these guys don't like you. And Trump said, I know they don't. And he said, they used to hate you. They used to attack you. And Trump says, I know, which means they flip back to attacking him. But if he does no deal, Mario, I've seen you on your podcast with some of the other guests when you keep telling them, guys, China is rising. Guys, China is rising. And the reason China is rising is not just because China looks incredible with its AI and its technology and its cities that it's built. It's because America keeps embarrassing itself with failed military expeditions that blow up the image of America being a superpower. America lost in Vietnam. America failed in Iraq. It now has to negotiate in Iraq with the Iranians in order to get a prime minister to be put in Baghdad. It lost in Afghanistan. The Taliban now are ruling Afghanistan, and Trump is struggling to get the Bagram base back, and he's relying on the Pakistanis to pressure the Afghans to allow him to have a presence in Bagram, and the Taliban are telling him, absolutely not. Wherever the Americans go on these expeditions, no one is saying America is a military superpower anymore. So under the Trump presidency, the historians will write, this was the presidency where it was revealed in its finality that American power is not what it used to be because it couldn't bring Iran to heel. And Trump never needed to do this. It was the Israelis who wanted it. The State Department document on its own website says that we entered the Iran war at the request of our ally Israel. It doesn't even say it was America. It's on the official State Department website. It says we entered at the request of Israel. Meaning the worst part, if you're an American, especially if you're America first, is that not only did you get dragged into a war that you acknowledge you had no interest in, but that you were so humbled in this war that now the world is now looking for alternatives where you're no longer the hegemon. It's a disaster whichever way that you look at. And whatever semblance these Gulf allies had that maybe America is not done yet, you've literally just told them, I don't give a damn about your opinions, go and normalize with the Israelis. I don't know how Trump turns this around, to be honest. And what I'm concerned about is that he will keep escalating at the behest of the Israelis by making these outrageous demands that nobody can accept in the hope of securing something that is unattainable. Whereas in reality, if I was advising Trump, if I was in that office in the White House with Donald Trump, not that I'm being presumptuous and I don't want to be in that room and I have no intention of ever being in that room, I would tell Donald Trump, Mr. President, just cut your losses while you can. You still have time to change things around domestically. It is what it is. Just, blame it on somebody else. Sack Hegseth and say it was his fault. Get rid of J.D. Vance for not stopping you. Marco Rubio, keep him on board or whatever. And just move on. Cut your losses. And it's bewildering that Trump still refuses to do so.
You keep saying, so I got so many notes. You keep saying that how can Saudi accept to normalize relations with Israel? By the way, I agree. This war has sabotaged any chance of Abraham's Accords moving forward. But when you keep saying when they can't even get you a ceasefire, well, they did. There's been a ceasefire, not a perfect one, at least when it comes to Iran, for weeks now. So one can argue that the lobbying by the Gulf to end the war, when everyone thought there'll be troops on the ground, has worked. So that's one point to take into consideration. And then the other one about Trump making outlandish demands, I see the complete opposite happening. Maybe it's just me, and I've been optimistic for a while. But Trump made a post yesterday saying he's fine with the enriched uranium going to another country. Before, he kept saying it's going to come to the US, it's going to come to the US. Now he's saying, oh, it can go to another country and they can take care of it. Another one, he did a post 2-3 days ago about Iran. No threats, no attacks, nothing at all. A very diplomatic post, even saying Iran may join the Abraham's Accords. And then the third one is he's open to unfreezing assets for Iran and is no longer talking about no toll booth at the Strait of Hormuz. So where we are now to where we were before, one can also make the argument that the lobbying by the Gulf has worked, and the influence by Israel, as Netanyahu reportedly said to Channel 14, he doesn't have the same influence he once did.
Let's imagine me and you are sitting in Riyadh, Mario, and this ceasefire has taken place. Hormuz remains shut. The US blockade is still there. He's bombing the southern part of Iran. People still scared to go to Saudi Arabia. Markets still jittery, so they don't want to put their money in Saudi Arabia. Articles coming out saying UAE will never be the same again. Articles coming out questioning the sanity of investing in Saudi Arabia as capital flight, not from UAE, but at least from Saudi Arabia and these others. People decide to consider to put that money elsewhere. And you're a country that's now in deficit. You used to be in surplus. You're now in deficit. The requirement for the oil level needs to be higher. You're now having to revamp the way your infrastructure works because you can't rely on the Hormuz. You need a pipeline that goes towards the Red Sea. You need to accelerate the building of the Oxygen state. That requires you to rain down your neon projects and to cut the funding for that. Means you need to admit that all of that pomp that you gave when you went to Washington, when you went to the US and told them we're the future, you're telling them I oversold and I overdreamed. If you're somebody with millions of dollars, you don't listen to that pitch again after you've seen that it failed after 7-8 years. The Saudi Crown Prince says, I'm still being hurt by the impact of this so-called ceasefire. We need a more permanent deal in order to calm those markets down. They're not even allowing some of the most basic oil tankers to leave, and insurance prices are now going up as well. People are considering how to find alternative energy needs that may be very difficult at this moment in time. But the point is, people are trying to imagine a world in which they don't rely as much on Saudi Arabia. And it comes at a time where your Saudiization policy has not created the employment opportunities for ordinary Saudis that you thought it would create in order to get the Saudis to be on your side as well. So you're now having to wrestle domestically as well. The reality is that for the Saudis, this is still a disaster. And this ceasefire is worse than that which is being touted, because this ceasefire means there's no step to move forward, and I'm stuck in this limbo where my economy doesn't seem to be improving in that regard. And I think the Israelis, when they say that Trump is not listening to Netanyahu anymore, and I saw the report and I understand what you're saying, but the reality is that he may not be listening to Netanyahu with regards to the maximalist demands that Netanyahu is demanding, but certainly he's still listening to Netanyahu insofar as he's trying to say that if I can get something on for the Israelis, that might help me domestically. If I get some, it's why AOC, for example, is very hesitant when she comes out to talk about the Palestine-Gaza issue, because she's still not sure if she needs the Israelis on board in order to launch a presidential bid for 2028. It's why everybody's still watching. Really? And they're saying, the AOC is saying, okay, when the pressure comes, I'll call it a genocide. When there's no pressure, I'll say, guys, you know, it was a bit. The reality is that after Thomas Massie, AIPAC is trying to spread the message that Israel first politics, or rather, they don't use the word Israel first, that pro-Israel politics is good politics. AIPAC toppled Jamal Bowman. AIPAC toppled Cory Bush. AIPAC claims that it toppled Thomas Massie in one of the most expensive primaries. AIPAC is trying to tell those who are becoming anti-Israel that if you do it, you will lose. Don't get it twisted about this issue of public opinion. And that's the battle taking place in America in and of itself. The point that I'm saying here is that Trump may not be listening to Netanyahu with regards to the pursuit of a deal. But certainly the Israelis are saying, okay, Mr. Trump, if you don't want a war, I want these terms. And Trump says that's reasonable, but they're unreasonable. Israel says, okay, we won't attack Iran. You want to deal with the Iranians? We won't attack the Iranians. Thank you very much, Netanyahu. We'll bomb Gaza instead. Mr. President, you want to deal with the Iranians? Oh, you like them. You like Chelo Kebab Kubide and the gift that the Iranians are giving you through Pakistan. Okay, Mr. President, we won't bomb Iran. We'll go hit Lebanon. And by the way, can we hit Beirut as well? No, you can't hit Beirut. Okay, fine. We'll hit southern Lebanon. because we want
But
to.
it's important, but in South Lebanon, I just want to add one more thing. I don't want to justify it, but they are at war with Hezbollah. So Hezbollah did attack Israel as well. Now, I know Israel's been bombing them for a long time. If you want to go back, chicken and egg, it all started after October 7th when Hezbollah attacked Israel. I'm just saying that, at least for Lebanon, Israel's saying, look, this is a war that we're fighting unrelated to Iran. They're trying to draw a line between Lebanon and Iran.
But while Iran and Trump are trying to link it, and on this point, the reason why I won't start it on October 7th, I'll start it from the point of a ceasefire. Hezbollah says, we recognize the ceasefire, and we want the Israelis to leave southern Lebanon. Trump says, that's a reasonable demand. Israel, I want you to do so. Netanyahu comes out the following day and says, Donald Trump, we agree with the ceasefire, and we like that you're a man of peace, and we're going to set up a 10-kilometer buffer zone in southern Lebanon in order to finish those particular operations. That's not a ceasefire.
Was that? Sorry, when was that?
This was when they announced the ceasefire. Netanyahu came out and said, "We need
the second one." The Iran ceasefire. Yeah,
the Iran war. During the Iran war, when Iran said we won't abandon our ally, and then Trump talks to the Lebanese president. Lebanese president opens official talks with the Israelis, and the Israelis say, "Okay, we'll agree to the ceasefire." Netanyahu doesn't say, "I respect the ceasefire." Hezbollah says, "We're ready to acknowledge it." And the reason Hezbollah are sincere in this, not that I'm defending them, is because they are diminished. They are so battered by the onslaught from Israel. They need a breather. From a military perspective, they can't keep up with the Israelis in this regard. They want an environment where they can breathe. Why? Hezbollah fears that it's losing its influence in Lebanon because of all the damage that it's taken and because its leaders constantly are being taken out. So Hezbollah was ready to abide by the ceasefire, not because it wants the ceasefire, because it has no choice but to abide by it. Netanyahu is the one who came out and said, okay, I agree to it. It's a great ceasefire. It's a wonderful ceasefire. And I'm going to do a 10-kilometer zone inside southern Lebanon. That's not a ceasefire, Mario. And this is the issue that people are taking with regards to the Israelis. In that Netanyahu doesn't tell Trump, I don't like what you're doing. He tells Trump, it's like, I don't know if you ever read about the Bosnian War, but there is a book, Inescapable Questions by Ali Izetbegovic. Mario, I highly recommend it if you haven't read it. It's a masterclass in politics. Anyway, Ali Izetbegovic, he writes in his interactions with the US ambassador, Richard Holbrooke. He says Holbrooke had a way of always making you feel understood. He would go to the Croats, the Serbs, and the Bosniaks and tell each one of them, you are absolutely right. I exactly understand, and I know exactly why you need to do this. But, and then he will reframe it in a way to justify it, to make it feel like it's within their framework. Netanyahu doesn't tell Trump, I don't like what you're doing. He says, Mr. President, you're on the ball. What you're doing is, this ceasefire, and to make sure this ceasefire lasts, I'm going to go 10 kilometers into Lebanon to make sure that there is no one who can violate that ceasefire. That's a violation. And this goes back to the original point. The reason why I mention it, in case anybody feels we veered off topic, it goes back to the first point, Mario. What's Iran's greatest concern? Iran wants a deal. Saudi wants a deal. UAE want a deal, albeit they would prefer to take the islands back first, but they want a deal. Qataris want a deal. Kuwait wants a deal. Omanis want a deal. The Iraqis, they want a deal. They don't want the pressure because the militias in Iraq are worried that if something happens to Iran, something will come to them in Iraq. The Syrians want a deal because they're being put in an awkward position whereby they're sort of neutral. Iran did horrible things to us, so did the Israelis. Let them hit each other. The reason it goes back is Iran is ready to sign a deal tomorrow, and possibly even Trump. The problem is the Iranians are saying, why would I give Trump his victory, the headline of making a deal, if he can't even rein Israel in the smallest things? If he can't even tell Netanyahu, what do you mean 10 kilometers in southern Lebanon? Move back and keep the peace there. Trump could have said to Netanyahu, just so people don't think I'm being unreasonable here, Trump could have said to Netanyahu, let's send in an international force into southern Lebanon in order to keep, if Netanyahu is really worried. And I think Hezbollah would have agreed to it because they would have had no choice but to agree with it. He could have said, I'll send an international force. And I think Turkey, Erdogan would have sent it. I think the Qataris, who don't usually fight, they would have sent a force. I think the UAE would have sent a force to make sure Erdogan doesn't get influence over Lebanon. I think the Saudis would have sent a force. And Trump could have said, okay, you don't go into southern Lebanon. I'll send an international force there. The options are there. Like, they exist. It's why when Egypt in the Sinai Peninsula, they said, we don't want the Israelis there. If they have to be there, let it be an international force. And Netanyahu said, no worries. I'll look after that Philadelphia corridor instead. The reason why I say this is that every analyst worth his salt, at least in my circles, in those signal circles, in whatever, all these who are in these different think tanks, Mario, everybody is saying the same thing, that this deal doesn't hinge on Iran and Trump. Trump has already suggested that he's willing to make concessions on the nuclear issue. Iranians have suggested they're willing to make concessions on the nuclear issue. You said it yourself. I'm ready to accept the nuclear going elsewhere. They've even agreed that they're willing to make a deal without fulfilling the details that were once considered a red line, meaning the Iranians and the Americans saying, let's start with opening the Hormuz Strait. We'll discuss nuclear later. Trump is willing to agree to that according to reports, which is extraordinary when you consider where he was before. Everybody is saying the issue is not whether Trump and Iran will concede to each other. The issue is Trump shows no willingness, the way he did in the beginning of his second presidency, to rein in the Israelis. And that's emboldening the Israelis to keep pushing harder in terms of opposing this deal itself. And that's why I think that what happens inside America, and I'll finish on this point, is so integral, because what is required to rein in the Israelis is a defiance of Israel in America itself. But if you're watching what happened to Thomas Massie, if you're watching what's happening in some of these races, are you going to come out and say, I'm against Israel, when tomorrow Miriam Adelson can pour, and the other lobby, they can pour billions to topple you when Massie was considered a king in Kentucky? That's the issue here. Who's going to stand up again? And if America won't do it, then Israel is so desperate.
Thomas Massie's story is crazy. It just shows that it's too early for that, because they're still the older generation that does not watch social media, does not see anything beyond Fox News and that echo chamber they're in. What do you need to see? First, can you tell me about the Al-Aqsa Mosque? You said it's going to make it into a multicultural, multi-religion center. What are you talking about there?
So a few years ago, there were reports that land was being bought from Palestinians around Al-Aqsa and handed over to the Israelis. For context, for those who don't know, one of the issues that Israel has around Al-Aqsa is Palestinians won't sell their land around the Al-Aqsa Mosque because they fear the Israelis will take it and then use it to destroy the Al-Aqsa Mosque. So as part of normalization efforts with the Israelis, this is the point about Saudi and the UAE began pressuring the Jordanian king to share the custodianship of Al-Aqsa. Right now, the Hashemite kingdom is the custodian of Al-Aqsa. It's part of the peace treaty between Jordan and Israel. The Saudis and the UAE, as part of normalization efforts with the Israelis, were trying to pressure Jordan to share the custodianship. And according to the former Qatari Prime Minister Hamad bin Jassim, the rumors were that they would share custodianship and then hand it over to Israel in order to get the Israelis to agree to some sort of peace. Then the topic died after it became, there was a big backlash about Palestinians accusing the UAE of buying land on behalf of the Israelis and then selling it to the Israelis instead in order to. In any case, now there is a report, Middle East Eye reported on it 2 days ago, that the Israelis and the US are trying to lobby Jordan to say to Jordan right now that Al-Aqsa is registered as a Muslim area. It's a Muslim mosque. We want that custodianship to shift from, in Arabic we have in Saudi Arabia, Khadim al-Haramain al-Sharifain. The king of Saudi Arabia, his title is not king. His title is the custodian of the two holy mosques. The third holy mosque is Al-Aqsa. The Hashemite kingdom of Jordan, he is Khadim of the third haram, of the third holy site, which is Al-Aqsa. It's a religious title. They want to change this title to a multi-faith center, which would remove the exclusivity that the Muslims have over that Al-Aqsa, because the Israelis like Ben Gvir believe that it should be destroyed and the Temple Mount should be built on top of that Al-Aqsa itself. The reason the Israelis are pushing for this is now is a golden opportunity to do so, given that the Arabs are not ruling out normalization, given that the UAE is hold firm on normalization, given that the Saudi Crown Prince, even if he's ruled out normalization, is not reversing the actions that he's taken already with regards to shutting the airspace once more, or banning the Israelis from visiting Saudi Arabia again, or even withdrawing the funding from Kushner's investment fund that he uses to go and invest in Israel. And Kushner told Sky News, told Kay Burley, said to her that I have permission from the Gulf states to use their money to invest it in the Israeli economy. Bin Salman hasn't reversed any of that, suggesting this isn't a reversal of normalization. It's a pause until I see genuine goodwill. The Israelis are taking advantage of this to try to push, to pressure Jordan, which is under heavy pressure, to cede its custodianship of the Al-Aqsa Mosque. And we'll notice during Ramadan, for the first time, Ramadan was when? It was like March or February, in any case. During Ramadan, for the first time in like 78 years, the Al-Aqsa Mosque was shut for 2-3 weeks. It was the first time. The Israelis refused to allow Muslim worshippers to go into the Aqsa Mosque. And when they went in afterwards, Ben Gvir brought his mob to go in and bully the worshippers in Al-Aqsa Mosque to make it unbearable for Muslims to go into the Al-Aqsa Mosque itself. The Israelis believe now is a good time to take control of that particular area. It depends whether the Arabs will respond to it, whether Turkey will respond to it in and of itself. But the reason I mention it is It shows you where the Israeli thinking is at. And Mario, look at the polls. For everything that Netanyahu has done, for all of the missiles that rained over Tel Aviv, for all of the damage that was brought to Israel as a result of Netanyahu's war, the polls show that his joint list is still first place. The polls show that he's still set to win the election, which is why once upon a time I might have said that Netanyahu is the aberration in Israeli society. It may well be that the reason Netanyahu is doing all this, the reason why he's insistent on war, is because maybe Mario, I'm not going to say it definitively, maybe that's what the Israeli society wants. Maybe Netanyahu is the accurate representation of Israeli society. Maybe what he's saying is, I'm an elected prime minister democratically in Israel, and my people want war. My people want more land. My people want the Palestinians.
The reason they want war, not more land. The reason they want more war, because they feel this is the path to security. Because this is what the government keeps saying, that we've got all these attacks. We're being attacked on this front, on that front, on that front. That attacking back is the solution. And I think this is why
I would rephrase it that we keep attacking and then get attacked back, and then we go.
But that's the thing. That's not how it's framed. But exactly, that's not how it's framed for the Israelis, and that's why they see things very differently to people on the outside. What do you need to see to change your mind on who calls the shots, whether it's Trump and Netanyahu?
Trump,
because I'm in the position that Trump has more influence over decisions than Netanyahu.
No, I agree entirely. America always has. It's like that famous quote from Bill Clinton. Who is the, I don't swear in daily life, but who is the expletive superpower here? He said, who is the superpower here? Bill Clinton famously remarked when Netanyahu kept demanding that America does stuff in the Middle East, Clinton said, I'm the superpower here, not you. But Trump and even Biden beforehand, they always had the power to rein in the Israelis. I think what's important to understand is Israel lacks the military capacity to engage in long-term war on its own. That's why the reports are coming out that America has already depleted half of its missile supplies, because it needs the Americans on board in order to be able to fight the rest of the region. The Americans always have the ability to rein in the Israelis. The problem I think that the Americans have, or at least the American presidents have, is that often in the past there is a cost to reining in the Israelis domestically, that there is a lobby within the US itself that proactively pursues pro-Israel policies, and that you might pay a political cost for defying the Israelis. Trump has done it before. I think the ceasefire that Trump imposed on the Israelis in the beginning of his second term took Netanyahu by surprise. Trump doesn't need to ask Netanyahu. Trump can announce tomorrow and say, I'm making a deal with the Iranians, and Israel will have no choice, because it cannot continue the war on its own, but to rein it in. Trump could say, I will condition weapons on the Israelis, not because I care about any moral virtue. I'm not going to be bold and say that Trump cares about this stuff. But Trump could say, I need this headline. I'm sorry, Netanyahu. I need it. You're going to have to, and if you don't, I'm going to withdraw or withhold the aid that goes towards the Israelis. Netanyahu can't survive without that particular support. And that's why I think it's a matter of willpower. Right now, it's who does Trump believe is easier to offend? If I offend the Israelis, I might suffer domestically. But if I offend the Gulf, what happens to me domestically? Nothing. I'm not suffering as much. I wouldn't suffer as much as a result. And that's why I think that what requires is Trump to wake up and basically have one of his bouts where he watches poll ratings fall on Fox News and turn around and say, you know what, I've had enough. And the reason I say, because Trump's behavior is erratic. There was a report today, I don't know if you've seen it, the Trump Board of Peace, since its inception, the bank account hardly has anything in it. For the last 4 months, there's been no activity in it. Initially, a few million was put in by some of the states. A few million is funding the office of the representative. A few million or whatever. But the bank account has been inactive for 4 months. I think it was on Reuters or one of the reports. The point being is that, as we said at the time, for Trump, he doesn't care about the details. Trump wanted a headline. Trump wanted a Nobel Peace Prize. Trump wanted the world to say, oh, Mr. President, you're so great and you brought about peace and you're amazing. It needs Trump to wake up, be bored of the war with Iran, to be bored of listening to Netanyahu and say, you know what, I'm going to do something no one's expecting. Ceasefire in Iran, and I'm going to sign the deal. And the Israelis say, what the hell did you just do? Trump has the ability to do that. And I think that's the stumbling block. I think when you look at the reports, Mario, and this is the point that I make, and I want everybody to understand it. The reality is that the Iranians, for all of their resistance against the Americans, Iranians don't want to keep up this state of war. They don't want to keep it up. Remember, some of their leaders are being killed. The infrastructure is being damaged. And, they risk, they need a lot of money to rebuild afterwards. And remember, Iran has seen protests on the streets, mass protests over their economic situation before. They don't want to be in this position for too long. So Iran is making concessions. Iran is being told by the Pakistanis, guys, make the deal. Make it. And the Iranians are saying, we understand it. Saudi Arabia is telling the Iranians, make the deal. The Iranians are saying, sure, no problem. Trump is saying, I can't get the deal that I want, but fine. We'll release some frozen assets. We won't lift sanctions, and we'll deal with the Iranian issue later. Everybody is making concessions. The only reason there's no deal is Trump is unsure how far he wants to offend the Israelis. And that's
there's no deal yet. Like if you see a deal, would you reconsider that position of yours about
if a deal comes? What I will say, I'll tell you what I will say now. If a deal comes, I will say that Trump slapped the Israelis' hands. That Trump grabbed them and said to them, enough, get out of my way. Iran, come, let's sign. That's the only way the deal will get signed. It's if he grabs Netanyahu, throws him off to the side, and says, sign this deal now. And I remember, Mario, I don't know if you remember it, when they assigned the ceasefire, the one that I mentioned when Trump imposed it on Israel, there was an Israeli advisor or former intelligence, I will need to find it on Google later, who said that Witkoff, when he went to see Netanyahu, did the equivalent of putting Netanyahu's arms behind his back and told him, sign the damn paper. You know, like really squeeze Netanyahu in that regard. That's what's required. Grab Netanyahu and force him to sign. And the Americans
Trump can do that. Trump can do that. He's politically so popular in Israel, and Netanyahu needs that support.
Trump has done it before. Trump has done it to Netanyahu before. He's genuinely done it. Trump has had his way before.
Or the Qatar, the call to Qatar
with Gaza. I think even with Qatar, when Trump came in, I believe that Trump, the Israeli attack on Qatar wasn't necessarily done with Trump's green light, or rather, I don't think Trump was wholly on board with it. But I think Trump would have said to the Israelis, no, like none of that. Like don't do any of that. Trump has the ability to put his foot down. But I will say this: remember who's around Donald Trump. Remember, it's Witkoff, it's Jared Kushner. Remember, it's very heavily pro-Israel individuals.
Yeah,
remember,
individuals that do business. Kushner does a lot of business with the Gulf as well.
But Kushner does a lot of business with the Gulf on the basis that he believes that will bring them closer to normalization of ties. But even if you remember when Trump went to visit Miriam Adelson in this party, and Mark Levine held Trump like that and said, I call you the first Jewish president. I call you the first Jewish president, even though I believe that many Jews are innocent of that Zionism ideology. But in any case, I think that those who are around Donald Trump, and I think Tucker alluded to this as well. He said a lot of people around him are just telling him, just do it. This is the way it should be. Tucker Carlson even alluded, and I don't necessarily believe it, but I'll just say it out there to give some of the theories out there, that the bubble around Donald Trump is telling him that this is a good idea, that he's not receiving the full picture of what it looks like. Now, I don't necessarily believe that, but there's certain argument to be made that there are more pro-Israeli voices around Donald Trump than there are those who are calling him to do a ceasefire. And I'll prove it with this. Notice how Marco Rubio and J.D. Vance are not loud on the issue anymore. It's almost as if they said, I don't want to get involved in this mess. I want to, you know what I mean? This is clearly like a storm I don't want to get involved in. Have you noticed Rubio didn't go to Pakistan? Have you noticed Rubio is barely involved in negotiations? Rubio gets the report, but doesn't necessarily engage in it. Because I think Rubio has calculated, this is a losing streak. I don't want to be associated with it. I don't want to be near it. This is why some people thought that Rubio screwed J.D. Vance over by recommending J.D. Vance go to Pakistan. You take the fall for it. You go and be associated with this miserable policy. I'm going to go to Miami and party. I'm going to talk about Cuba because Cuba is an easier win. Cuba is something I can put my face on it. I'll do a Spanish-speaking video, and then we can go into Cuba, do a Venezuela issue, and that's a victory. I won't be associated with Iran. You'll be associated with Iran. So when I run for president, I can tell people Iran was a bad idea. I had nothing to do with it. I think people around Trump are seeing it, and the ones who know it's wrong, I think Rubio sort of checked out of that because he sees everybody around Trump is telling Mr. President, go ahead and do that. And that's dangerous. I mean, sometimes you forget about politics, that a king can be locked up in a palace. And the king can be very isolated. Like Marie Antoinette, before she was executed, when she came out and saw the French Revolution and people protesting, she said, why are they protesting? Like why is it, what's going on here? In the palace, she had no idea what was going on outside. Trump may well have no idea what's going on outside. And it may well be, and this is the dangerous part, in that Massie's defeat, Trump will not say this is Israel defeating Massie. He will say, I ran a candidate against Massie, and my candidates, they win. So Trump will say, this means people still agree with me and they still agree with my policy. So I should continue as I am. So it might not just be the pro-Israel voices. It may well be that Trump has a misreading of the current American landscape. And when those midterm elections come and he takes a shot, assuming that the Republicans lose, I don't believe this yet. But if we were sitting, me and you, having a coffee somewhere in London, I would say to you, and I would ask you, Mario, I'd be like, Mario, do you think maybe Trump thinks that he's going to win the midterm elections? Do you think Trump has no idea just how bad the situation is amongst Republicans? Do you think he still believes that because it's Trump, he'll be able to pull off another win again? I think Trump is riding his luck. But to be honest, it's America. You never know what could happen in America.
True. Sammy, always a pleasure, man. Thanks a lot
Mario,
for jumping on.
thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Thank you for having me.
Take care, brother. Thank you. Thank you, Sammy. All right, guys. One of my favorite guests on the show. I know I say this a lot, but Sammy's just a flood of information. He's got so much going on there. I don't need to ask much, as you see. I just need to give him the mic. I hope you enjoyed the conversation. Let me know what you think. I'll be going live again in exactly. We've got an incredible line of guests today, guys. We've got Colonel McGregor in an hour. He was meant to be yesterday. We had technical issues. Then we've got Dave Rubin to talk about the split in Maga. We got Amit Segal, I think, from one of the Israeli news outlets. I think channel N12 News. He's a political analyst on that news outlet in Israel. Then we've got Elijah Magnier, who's a regular on the show. Me and him debate a lot. We've got Alex Christoforou, who's a regular as well. We might have more guests after Alex. Most likely we will. And that's just my interviews. I think my co-host Azi will have a couple of interviews as well. All right, guys. Hope you enjoyed it. Let me know what you think in the comments. Really enjoyed the comments yesterday. You guys were very sincere. And I'll see you again in an hour. Bye.